and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission has warned of a significant rise in provocative content on social media. It means posts related to hate speech and potentially inciting violence and extremism. So has the digital realm become a breeding ground for divisiveness and discord? And how can we stop the undercurrents of online hate from boiling over into real life? Joining us on the show now is Dr. Ryan Chua, Program Director at the Human Rights Group Pusat Komas. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. The MCMC says there's been a significant rise in provocative content on social media. I'm just wondering, based on the work that you do, Pusat Komas has been publishing the Malaysian Racism Report annually for the past 9 years. So your observations, how does racism manifest itself on social media platforms? What are you observing?
All right. Thanks, Melissa, for the invitation, and I'm be more than happy to share a little bit with regards to the topic. So, of course, as you have mentioned, we have identified and we've been monitoring issues of racism in Malaysia for the past 9 years, identifying different trends of what's actually happening. In fact, when we look at the data, though the numbers have dropped in our report because we use really strict guidelines to identify what constitutes as racism and racial discrimination. But again, one of the key concerning things that we have seen is the rise of the use of racism, and race and religion in politics. And I think that is something which is quite concerning, especially today. And of course, the second thing is also, we have seen an increase, though the total number has decreased because it's not the election period. But when we look at the other cases, there are rising cases of racism in schools, racism in other areas, and much more as well. So even within local council jurisdiction as well, there are also cases of racism that are actually happening. So this is quite concerning in relation to all of this. And I think the recent statement by the Multimedia Commission has also highlighted that there's a rise of hate speech, and I believe that it is really interlinked with the current context of today. Small issues can be sparked into big debates online. And of course, when we are working and talking about these issues online, it's always in the guise of anonymity. I can always use a different name to just spark up different things and to trigger. It's a lot of keyboard warriors. And these are some of the concerning things that we have observed and we have identified. And that's really where we need to find a way on how we can address all of this.
Did the report find anything that showed the link of how provocative content online translates into real-world consequences?
Unfortunately, our report does not, because we are just analyzing the trends just to identify what are the key cases. But one of the things, in our engagement with social media outlets as well, we were also raising the point in terms of where algorithms in the social media also plays a huge role in all of this. And why do I say so? For example, even in our own conversations today, just say that you are interested to get fried chicken. The next moment you see fried chicken appearing in all the ads. Similar to that, when you are engaging with a lot of race, religious matters, it would actually reflect in the news or even in your own social media. So when you click something, you will get another more provocative thing. So it's how the algorithm works. And to a certain extent, it catches us in this echo chamber. And it's very difficult for us to come out. So when we are already in that echo chamber, it's very difficult for us to also hear the voices of reason from the other perspective, because the algorithm really forces you to be in that social in that echo chamber.
Right. That's very, very interesting. Can I ask you, what would you recommend as in terms of an outlet for Malaysians? I mean, are there constructive outlets for Malaysians to voice their concerns, their thoughts about sensitive issues? I mean, rather than resorting to kind of inflammatory online content or even manifesting that into kind of radical behaviors in the real world, do we have platforms and outlets where we can talk about this in a constructive manner?
Unfortunately, in Malaysia today, there is very limited platforms like this. Of course, what we are doing in Commas as well, we are trying to have more engagements to talk about such sensitive issues. And this is something that we have highlighted in the report, examining the Madani government for the past 1 year. The current outlets of when people experience issues of racism or inflammatory remarks, the only source or the only group that they can go is to the police. And then you have only three existing laws like the Multimedia Act, the Penal Code, and also the Sedition Act, which is also all quite concerning. So what we are calling now is also to have a commission to really try to do that mediation processes, because there's no other outlets. There are no way, because race is always a sensitive issue. And that's the reason why we are saying that, look, we need to have a National Harmony Reconciliation Commission. So that commission will be able to address such key issues, and if there are any conflict, then the commission will have the mediation power and to also sanction people from making such inflammatory remarks.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, because if you make a police report, it is the most extreme way of dealing with content that discomforts you or that you don't agree with. Earlier in our conversation, Ryan, you mentioned that the instances of racism in politics has increased, or you notice more of that happening. Can I ask you how you think we as a society can hold politicians accountable for their role in perpetuating some of these inflammatory remarks or even tensions?
I mean, of course, we need to question our politicians. I mean, I think, again, it depends on the location, because, certain times the politicians are doing this because they know this message sells, right? So again, that we need to be a little bit woke in that sense to understand that, look, these are all big issues, and what are the impacts sometimes on us? There are certain politicians who say, oh, this particular ethnicity is under threat, this particular religion is under threat. My question to them is that what exactly is under threat? So that next level of critical thinking is still missing, unfortunately, at this point of time. But we need to be a little bit more woke, try to question them and say, what exactly are you talking about? So, these messages do sell, but I think we as the voters as well, we need to be questioning them. We need to also, if you know that there are those who are continuing to incite these issues, then don't vote for them in the next elections. But of course, in that whole pretext, it's going to be very difficult.
Just for those of us who are watching, we have come across provocative content on our individual social media platforms. What advice would you give for us to manage or react to that? Should we react? Should we not react? What would you recommend?
I think at this point of time, a lot of us are really what they call as a silent majority. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about the silent majority. They are uneasy about the issue, but they're just remaining silent. But I think it's also important for us to fight back and to just say, look, this is not unacceptable. This is unacceptable in our country today. And then, all this time, we are just letting one side control the narrative. But what happens to the other side, who are always considered to be silent? So I guess it's also timely for us to also, just comment and say, no, look, this is not right. And let's just debate this out internally. So we need to also be engaging these conversations. Oftentimes we just leave it quietly and just say, leave everything to be what it is. And then it just spiral down to what we are seeing today.
So the moderates have to be loud too. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on this show. Dr. Ryan Chua from the human rights group Pusat Komas. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about addressing online hate and extremism before it spills over into real-world consequences. Joining me now on the show is Suyin Chia, research consultant at the Initiative to Promote Tolerance and Prevent Violence, or better known as Initiate.my. Suyin, thank you for being on the show with me today. I'm just wondering, based on your research, what concerns you about the trends of online hate and extremism that you've observed of late?
Thanks, Melissa. It's good to be here. So in our research, I think what we see is following the 15 January election, we've observed a marked increase of dangerous and provocative online content. And these are particularly targeting of minorities, refugees and migrants, and the LGBTQI community. I think most notably that we've seen are narratives related to the 13 May racial riots that had surged on TikTok. And there was warning of a resurgence of war and violence if the liberal and pro-Chinese Pakatan Harapan coalition will come to power again. So a lot of these dangerous narratives are running along the lines of narratives of race and religion. So notably, global political events such as last year's October 7 attack from the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict are also contributing to domestic incitement of anti-minority sentiments online. So for example, we're seeing a lot of hateful narratives against refugees and migrant communities, particularly against the Rohingyas and their existence here as a threat or a sort of a neo-Zionist attempt to recolonize the land as well. So unfortunately, hate is becoming increasingly normalized in online spaces. And our concern is that this is raising the risk of hateful attitude that can manifest in real life situations.
Right. So do you have any examples, or can you highlight any existing efforts that's being taken aimed at combating this rising online hate?
So we know that social media platforms such as TikTok and Meta, through their official channels and their publications have informed us that they are taking down a lot of these hateful and provocative content. But what we also know is that the rate of dissemination of such contents always far exceed our ability to counter that. Mostly because a lot of these contents are also supported by AI generation that really increases the scale and the speed of how it's being produced and it's being distributed. And also the fact that a lot of these contents are not overt in its hateful or dangerous rhetorics. A lot of it also involves subtle messaging using music, images, memes, artwork, and videos that often tends to sort of fall through the gaps in these content moderation tools. And so there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of like moderating these online spaces and then ensuring that it doesn't translate into real world harm.
I'm sure we've all seen these types of contents and hateful comments online in our own social media platforms. I'm just wondering, Suyin, whether you have any advice or recommendations for empowering individuals and communities to resist online hate or to push back against extremist narratives.
I think there are many layers to this on how to address this issue. It's definitely a complex issue and definitely needs multi-sectoral approach to it. It's specific to communities and individuals. I think it's very important for us to equip ourselves with digital literacy, but also understanding peaceful resolutions and conflict mediations when it comes to countering provocative content. Having digital literacy also means enabling ourselves to know how to fact check and understand where to find legitimate sources for our information, but also being able to discern between disinformation and curbing the proliferation of it. But I think more importantly, I think as much as we can equip ourselves on an individual level, I think more importantly is we need whole of government and whole of society efforts in order to curb that. And that is by having longer term solutions, such as having peace educations, such as working with tech companies to moderate, better moderate, its platforms.
So your work with Initiate.mind, I'm just wondering, yes, we want kind of a holistic approach. So the role of social media organizations like Initiate.mind, how do you feel that you contribute to fostering safer environments, both online and also offline?
I think our position in Initiate is as such. We believe that existing laws and legal action is necessary and will always be necessary in order to curb online hate and also offline violence as a consequence of that. But we advocate the integration of restorative justice principles in the societal response. We need to move beyond traditional punitive actions such as imprisonments and fines, because these actions, while necessary to mitigate harm, is not addressing the underlying issues that perpetuate such content or support for such harmful narratives. So we think that the approach must include implementing mandatory public apologies, mediation sessions, and even counseling for people and individuals who perpetuate harmful narratives. The goal is to not only prevent and mitigate communal tensions, but really to really address the root causes of these extremist views. Why are people supporting them? Why are people perpetuating them? And then why are people, so motivated by these online narratives that they go out and, commit harmful, actions in the real world? So we think that these kind of restorative approaches do these, they mitigate and prevent harm, but also address, the root causes. And more importantly, it's to provide healing and closure for affected communities. And all of these measures, I think, what we can do is to help de-escalate communal tensions and transform harmful perspectives before it actually becomes more harmful to our society.
What does that look like, Suyin, for if it were to be translated into policy, for instance? What would that look like? All those wonderful initiatives that you talked about, how would that look like in today's Malaysia?
I think it will look like, looking at adapting our existing laws and legal instruments to adapt them to the growing social political risk that we have. I think the cases that involve provocative content and hate speech should be proportionally addressed by including, the expansion of the hate speech severity. So depending on where the hate speech is and the severity of what's being conducted, you can start with having restorative justice and then, moving up in its severity to then, have, more punitive actions against. But always ensuring that these communal approaches are well integrated in both on a legal, but also on a communal and social level. I think it's incredibly important.
Thanks, Suyin. That was Suyin Chia from Initiate.my. And as we continue our discussion about online hate and extremism, one cannot ignore the role that politicians play in shaping the discourse. So joining me now is Taufik Ismail, former UMNO MP for Sungai Benut, Johor. He's the eldest son of Malaysia's second Deputy Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Ismail Abdul Rahman. Taufik, thank you for being on the show with me today. How can we get politicians to stop stoking hate and racial and religious tensions? It's a big question, but what do you think we can do?
I think that's asking for the impossible, Melissa, to be quite honest. Politicians thrive on controversy, and when there's no controversy, they try to make themselves relevant by making something controversial, as you can see from what's happened in the KK Mart issue.
Right. But surely there must be ways for us to prevent politicians from exploiting religious and racial tensions for political capital. Are there ways that we can disincentivize politicians from doing this?
Well, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. They crave media attention, and if the media gives them the space for the topics that they talk about, then obviously they will continue to prey on those topics, whether it's religion, race, or royalty. And I think the more the media gives them the space, the more hungry they become.
But is that putting the onus on, and I say this with all due respect as being a practicing member of the media, but are you putting the onus on the media to censor essentially what the public should and should not hear as news? Wouldn't it be better to just report the news as factual and leave it up to the audience to decide?
Yeah, I mean, that is freedom of the press, which I strongly believe in. But the way social media has come on to the scene as a tool, if they don't get the publicity through the mainstream media, they will do it on their own. Everybody is their own broadcaster, and everybody is their own newspaper. So if you are trying to minimize the effect of the politicians and how they stoke up the fire, then obviously the fire extinguisher is in your hands. So I'm not blaming the media because politicians thrive on publicity, as you know. But if someone in authority puts the foot down to say, I don't want any more of this nonsense, will the media comply, or will they continue to stoke the fire that's been lit?
Right. Taufik, this may be a basic question or an obvious question, but I'm hoping we can think through some of the roots of it. What do politicians benefit, or how do politicians benefit from stoking tensions, from fanning tensions?
Well, I think one of the key problems is that everybody is ignorant of their rights under the Constitution, and not many people are conversant with the law. So the politicians themselves who make the law in Parliament don't know exactly what the Constitution is, and they make things up as they go along. And sometimes this can lead to some confusing uh, issues being laid out. Like, for example, religion and the law. It's very clearly stated in the Constitution that religion comes under the purview of the rulers, but the politicians think that they are above the Constitution and try to amend the laws to suit whatever party line they are pushing. And it's not often that people can tell the politician, you're wrong, that this is not according to the Constitution, and you are not. It's not right for you to do this. One good example of this is RUU 355 in the last Parliament. When it was tabled, I had to go to court to protest it because they did not follow the standing instruction, and I took the speaker to court, and I was very vocal in pointing out the fact that PAS, that tabled the resolution, did not get the approval of the Council of Rulers before they even touched on the question of religion. So if, as a non-parliamentarian, I had to do this, what about the MPs in Parliament? Did anyone there who has upheld the oath to protect and preserve the Constitution do so? I mean, this is the anomaly that we're all facing as members of the public.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you want to see someone put a stop to whenever there are racial and religious issues being, the flames of those issues being fanned. Can I ask you who you think should take responsibility for putting a stop to those types of issues? Who would be well positioned? Is it the party president whenever politicians from their party make these remarks or fan those flames? Is it the Prime Minister? Is it the rulers? Who should it be?
Well, I mean, when it comes to religion, we should listen to the Agong and the sultans of every state. We don't have to listen to the a party president of any party that claims to speak for Islam, because they have no right under the Constitution to do so. When it comes to the law, obviously the person that is most important is the Prime Minister. After all, he is elected to hold that office. He's been appointed by the king, no doubt, but he holds the majority in Parliament from our votes, and he should step up and do the right thing. Don't be afraid of petty politics and allow the country to go down the drain.
Right. So you said at the beginning of our conversation that it's going to be a very tall order to get politicians to stop playing on race and racial and religious sentiments. What advice would you give to the public in recognizing and combating some of these political exploitations, the political machinations of using racial and religious issues for political capital?
Okay, I think as far as the public is concerned, we should all be well versed in the Constitution. It's not difficult to um, use social media to get onto YouTube and listen to experts like Professor Shad Faruqi or retired judges like Dr. Hishamuddin Yunus of the G25 to speak about your rights and listen to what they have to say about the Constitution and then read it for yourself. The Constitution is not difficult to find. It is not a banned book, but the more you know, and the more you converse with lawyers, and this is where the media can come in. The more you play up people's rights and current issues, and maybe have a segment on how the Constitution affects you on day to day. I think that goes a long way towards making the public more educated and the politicians less able to fool us.
Taufik, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. That was Taufik Ismail wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.